talked about another big part of maximizing, our potential and living out our purpose and unleashing our gifts. What you learned in your own story was you talked about it earlier, the power of connecting with the right people or finding mentors or finding blueprints that you want to build something similar to that you want to go after as well. Can you talk about how to identify good mentors and even how did you go about approaching them and connecting?
Yeah, that's major. I think it starts off with just the basics of who has what you want. Just start looking around, watch other people's marriages. And it's not too difficult. You go out with another couple and she doesn't order her food fast enough and you kind of see him get irritated and snap, and you knew you were coming to this restaurant before we got here, and mental note, I don't want a marriage like that. On to the next. You know what I mean? Or I'm at the same restaurant, I'm with Tia and Talent, and the bill comes and they grab the bill before I can get it. And I'm like, oh, I would never do that. And then they drop a $200 tip on $100 meal. And I'm like, oh, I couldn't even imagine doing that. You see something that you're like, man, I want that. I want to experience that. So that's step number one. Step number two is you start poking around. Man, ask questions. I'm never going to get access to Tia and Talent, but I can listen to their podcast. I can, start applying. I'm going to how'd you get there? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? Whether it's reading a book, listening to a podcast, or actually having access to a person. Here's one of the big things that I learned, honestly, the hard way. I'll give you a story. So I'll give you a quick story. So I got invited to a pastor's roundtable with, some of the most known who's pastors you would ever know. It was a 2-day event. I went, took 9 pages of notes. There's only about 15 people in the room, but I never asked one question. And honestly, I was intimidated. I was the smallest church in the room, that insecurity thing again. And they had their round table every year since. And for 5 years, I never got invited back. And what happened was 2 things. 1, I was invisible in the room. And 2, I hadn't really done anything with what I had gotten. And it was like, well, you don't need to be back in the room because you haven't even applied what you received the last time you were in an environment to learn. So I think a big thing is, sometimes we just want access to influential people. Man, if I could get around this millionaire, if I could get around this entrepreneur, if I get around this person, that person, or whatever, maybe, okay, would you do anything with what you got? Because I call it work a breadcrumb. If you could take the smallest, they wake up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever it may be, and they spend 20 minutes just thinking through their day. If I just apply that one thing I picked up and I see progress in my life, I'm going to get more access to that person. So it's really showing a return on investment for the mentoring or the book or the podcast or whatever investment you get in your life.
How did you bounce back from that moment? Because you took the step to identify mentorship, people that were ahead of you that you could learn from. You did what you had to do to get in the room. You took the notes, but then there was the disconnect between, you talked about the fact that you didn't ask questions. And then there was also the fact that you took all these notes that you didn't apply. So if somebody, like you said, there's people listening right now, been listening to this show for years, ain't paid off nothing.
Come on. I feel like we hit a nerve.
But you just spoke something like, man, I've got this information, but I haven't done anything. That could be a moment of further defeat. That could put you lower than you already were. How did you bounce back once you recognize the error?
Yeah. There's a chapter in the book called No Pain, No Pain. And the reality is, you think about working out in the gym, they said, no pain, no progress. I'm like, forget the pain. I just don't want any pain. Well, that's why you don't have muscles. Anyway, pain is a part of progress. And the faster you learn that, the faster failure, setbacks, difficulties, adversity won't have you quit forever. And I've been through a lot of pain, and I've learned it the hard way that failure is just part of the journey. So you just have those moments where you just sit in your house And you're like, man, that was stupid. I really should have said more, or I shouldn't have bought that, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. But then you realize there's some really influential, successful people that have made some really dumb mistakes, but they didn't let that dumb mistake be the last decision they ever made. And if they can bounce back from that, then I can bounce back from this as well. And I don't know who's listening to this podcast, but oh man, we all are so good at beating ourselves up. I should have. Why did I? I shouldn't have. Listen, everybody has a story of regret. Don't let your last mistake paralyze you and keep you from going after all that God has for you.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I'm curious, as you've gone on this journey and you are a husband, how do we, because there's a lot of couples listening, as we go on this journey trying to become all who God created us to be, how do we include our spouse, our significant other, the people that we love on this journey? Like, what type of conversations were you having with your wife, Zai, as she was there as you were trying to figure a lot of your story out, your journey out, and vice versa? How did you encourage her to do the same?
Yeah. So it's going to sound like I'm like continually plugging the book, which I am, but it's also because it's just my life. There's a chapter in there about you can't make it without a team. Any dream that's big enough to accomplish is too big for you to accomplish by yourself. And your team may just be you and your spouse. And in order for a team to win, a team first has to agree on where we're going and what the vision is. So long before I'm hitting barriers and trying to do this and trying to do that, man, me and Zai would be up. Even before we were married, we'd be on the phone till 1 a.m, 2 a.m. Man, imagine when, the church looks like this. Man, imagine when our kids graduate high school. Imagine when our money looks like this, and just dreaming about the future and setting a vision for it. So I think the first thing, particularly for married people, is you've got to have an agreed upon vision of here's what we want our kids to look like when they're 18. Here's what we want our money to look like. Here's what we want our career. Listen, me and Zai talked about the vacations we were going to take when we got out of debt. Like, man, listen, we going to Virginia Beach now, but I'm telling you, man, as soon as we get out of debt, we ain't going to no Virginia. We going to Cancun. I mean, we had plans and visions, and, we never went as far as cutting out pictures and vision boards and all that, but there's nothing wrong with that at all. You need, with your spouse, to have those moments where you're just dreaming about what could be, and then you're clear on what the steps are to get to where you want to go. Because a vision without strategy is just a fantasy. If you don't have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, then you're not. That's not a dream that's going to come to pass. And you need to talk about every step along the way.
Now, does that come back to the whole mentorship piece, the whole research piece? Because if I write my dream out, then the next step you said is now I can't just have the dream. I got to have strategy to make this dream become a reality. So 1, do you have anything that you would throw out there to do that? And then 2, like, how are you measuring on your journey as you were, for you specifically, it was to maximize your genius so that you could be the best pastor for your church and expand the kingdom agenda in your region. So how are you measuring, tracking, keeping yourself motivated to keep going, to keep pursuing it?
So if I got a 5-minute lunch with the host of His and Her Money, and I heard before they were this successful, a school teacher, served in our armed forces, I'm asking what changed? What was the decision, or how did you know I'm going to take this leap? What did it look like the first 3 months? What did it look like after 12 months? What are some major setbacks you faced? What are some adversity you had to push through? When was the mama I made it moment? When did you know that we're a big deal? Like, we got this. And now that you are successful, how do you stay motivated? What's the next? I'm going to ask questions that makes you unpack your journey. And I was just talking to somebody about this. When you have access to someone of influence, don't waste their time by processing your thoughts. ask questions, write a million notes down, and then go home afterwards and unpack your notes, unpack your thoughts, and all that. But after I get that 5 minutes, then I'm going home or wherever. And it's, there's an Old Spice commercial where the guy with all the muscles, he's like, look at your man. Now look back at me. Now look at your man. I could be your man, but I'm not because you with that joker. Like, I will go and I'll look at their life and then I'll look at mine. I'll look back at my life and I'll be like, okay, I've got to adjust here. Here's where they started. I'm not even there yet, so I need to get started. Okay, they hit this barrier. I'm hitting that barrier. It means two things. I'm not losing my mind. And second, I'm on the right track. And I'm literally just charting a course that I got from other people's success.
I hope you wrote that down, ladies and gentlemen.